Alright, this is Eric from EHS Racing. We are back here with Grizzly testing. This is a fresh 2019 model. It's been a couple years since we shot a video of the 16 to 18 platform. We did a couple of passes ahead of the videos just to see where it was at. We're really finding a lot of the same results that the 16 to 18 had. It's really lean on the bottom, quarter throttle and below. Wide open, it ran pretty solid. I guess to foreshadow what I assume we'll find is going to be at a lot of high engine temps at low speed, wide open throttle. It runs pretty good. Pretty much everything we said on the last videos about the 16 to 18 looks like it's going to transpire with this bike. I guess so. I'll show you some of the results we got so far, explain some of the stuff, and then I'll do some testing on the bike, and then we're going to go through the next levels of our testing. The first few passes we did was 100% stock Grizzly. No sniffer in, just raw horsepower numbers so we could see where it was at before we started. Then we did a second round of testing, which was a real simple mod. We just took a stock tip that you're going to come with from the factory, and we just cut it off right here. It's going to get you most of the gains like you guys running with the eBay exhaust tips right there. What it does is it allows us to run our sniffer tube up into the exhaust a lot farther and actually capture some of the gases coming out to start reading it. But it also picks up a couple of horsepower too. This bike responded better to it than the old bikes did as far as horsepower went. So this is where we're at. Here, come over on the side here. So a totally stock Grizzly is going to be this gold line right here. When we modified the tip, that is the red line. So a stock Grizzly with nothing done, we saw 33.5 horsepower. Now that will fluctuate a little bit day to day, run to run. CVTs are kind of funny. You got to do the test in the same exact way every time, same mile an hour. Which this one, we're going to be starting at about 11 mile an hour, which should run us to 63, 64 mile an hour, peak mile an hour. We will get there a lot quicker as we build more horsepower, but we won't be able to gain mile an hour because we're not modifying the clutch, at least at this point. So what we found, wide open throttle. Now this is air to fuel ratio down here. For people that don't know air to fuel ratio, most Grizzlies generally like somewhere around a 13.3 to 13.6, 13.5 to 13.7. That's where they ideally perform at wide open throttle. At quarter throttle, they usually like it a little bit richer, 13.2 to 13.4, maybe 12.9 to 13.3, just depending on the bike. So at wide open throttle from Yamaha, it's tuned pretty well. But that's what we found with the 16 to 18 platform too. They ran great out of the box at wide open throttle. At quarter throttle, 8 throttle, 3/8 throttle, where you use a Grizzly in the trails, where everybody is doing the majority of their riding, is where they're really lean at. That is this pass, the green run. So what we got with our sniffer tube, which the readings are probably pretty accurate. I'll know a lot more once we stick our open exhaust system, so I can really get up in there and do some readings. But it's going to be the same thing. We're running 14, 15 to 1. This model hasn't blocked the AIS yet, so that'll be some of the next testing. We'll see if that drops the air to fuel ratio. But same thing, quarter throttle, lean. Half throttle, blue run, still pretty lean. Wide open, gets pretty good. So I'm going to do some testing on our next little video segment. So I'll explain it here while we're close. Air to fuel ratio, 18.4 free air. We're targeting, we want a green right there. If you start seeing yellow and red, that's generally when the bikes are pretty lean. So you can kind of watch that. If you can see the colors more than the numbers sometimes when I'm sitting on the bike doing the testing. We got RPM and mile an hour. RPM, that's going to range pretty much the same. CVTs, I generally try to focus on mile an hour because what allows you to replicate the clutch data the best to compare what the changes we're making. Okay, full throttle with a tip picked up 2 horsepower. That was pretty noticeable across the board. So This bike actually responds better than the 1618 to a tip. We saw like a half a horsepower gain with that, so it's kind of more along the lines of the 1415. You know, those bikes always responded well from a tip. The 1618, those heads were just a little different. They didn't really like the tips, you know, or they didn't. Not that they didn't like them, they just didn't care whether they were there or not. Okay, next round testing. I'll give you some more knowledge. Okay, round 2 testing. I'm just going to show you a couple of the new things on the 19 platform that I like, dislike. You know, at least that's new versus 16, 18. And then we'll do a couple passes so you can see what's going on with that and see the actual runs that we did last time. Just replicate the last stuff. One of the bigger changes I like is this new dash. We got a couple different, you know, readings that we never had. So engine temperature is going to be one of those great things to keep track of, to see, you know, exactly where your bike's running. You know, not saying you couldn't do it before with some type of external gauge, but it's built right in here, so that will be handy. You know, I just had the bike running, so it's just kind of cooling right now. Once we start it up, it'll probably drop down a little bit. But we're going to try to do most of our testing between, you know, 190, 205. You know, that's kind of ideal operating temperature. The other thing is the new air filter setup. Here, I'm going to hand this over to my helper here. Okay, the lids, they are a little different, but, you know, they're so similar that there's almost no difference versus 16, 18. They did redesign this air filter a little bit. It is now, you know, instead of just the filter squishing up against the front here, they made another piece that it sits in that squishes up against the front, which, you know, has its pros and cons. I didn't like the old system at all. This whole new system, you know, I guess I still don't like it. I don't know if I like it better or worse than the old one. So now we got this, which probably should be greased, sitting up against the front. And then you have the air filter media, which has this. You know, the foam doesn't actually push against it. It's the steel screen sits here. You do have this lip that sits inside that, but I mean, there's a little bit of play right there. So now what I foresee happening is as these filters wear, they tend to kind of roll back a little bit. They'll loosen up. This is going to pull back here, and we're going to start sucking dirt around the front of this through those little holes. Can you see the holes? Okay, and then that's going to leak around that seal. And then this just gets sandwiched down in here. Oh, I guess the other thing, they kind of copied what we did on the 16 to 18. They cut this intake tube back. It used to hang back into your filter all the way to here. You know, now they made their own version of the new little adapter piece, but it's still Yamaha's sucky design. They make a great four-wheeler, but they make a crappy air filter. Okay, so that's there. Seal there, whatever. It works. It probably makes more horsepower than the old ones, but it's still gonna leak dirt. Okay. We're gonna change that. One of the future mods down the road. That'll probably be around 2 or 3 after we get our field controller testing done. These clips are still a pain in the butt to get off now. Alright. We'll do some testing on the bike. Here, I'll take over. Okay. Let me do some talk before we run it. I'm going to try to zoom in on this screen. It is hard for me to ride the bike and keep it not shaking, but I will do my best. So we got air to fuel ratio on the right, engine speed in the middle, mile an hour on the left. Okay. At idle, we're probably not actually reading that. There you go. At 18.4. We just don't have enough flow going through the exhaust to really pick it up the way we got the sniffer in there. We're going to need to build up a little RPM that pushes more gas before it really starts getting accurate. I would guess it's probably, you know, 15.5, but I'll know more once we get in a little deeper. and block the AIS, because the AIS will affect that idle air. I'm going to turn the fans on, so it's going to get noisy. I'll try to talk loud. I'll probably shut them off in a little bit, but I'm going to try to maintain our temperature here. Okay. We're sitting just off of idle right now. It's starting to pick up some of those gases, you know, 16 to 1, pretty lean. That's probably 8 throttle right now. Quarter throttle. See it dip down. I'm going to do it past that. We're going to record it at quarter throttle so you can kind of see, and then we're going to go half throttle and then quarter throttle or full throttle. And half throttle. Okay. Looks like we made a touch more horsepower on that pass than the last time we did it, but pretty much same stuff. Okay, we just got done installing the EHS racing tuner on it. I think this is round 3. We did a couple passes, figured out kind of what I had anticipated. A little bit of fuel brought the air to fuel ratio down, you know, right where we wanted it to, at 8 quarter throttle. Actually, a wide open throttle, it liked it a little bit richer. It picked up another 1.5 horsepower on top with the tuner as well. And at this point, it's following all the results that we found from the 16-18 testing. That's just, you know, different motor, different package, but it's all tuning basically the same. I'm going to show you guys a few things with the tuner installed on it, how to richen it up and what it's actually doing to the air to fuel ratio. We're going to do some blocking of the AIS. On and off, and show the different results of that. At this point, it's a little trickier to see because at idle and, you know, just off idle, there's not quite enough gas to get real accurate results, but it's, you know, it's showing us what we want to see, and then we'll do the whole other set of testing once we get the exhaust on there. I guess before I turn the bike on, I'll show you guys where the AIS is, because this is a real common question I get. I have to answer a lot. So you got your stock airbox here. This will be the same thing as the 16 to 18. This port right here, this is a rubber tube that's going to go up here, and it goes up to the little servo motor, and then it's going to go up there into the front of the block, or the head. When you are blocking the AIS system, you need to obstruct this line somehow. You know, what I usually do is I'll put a vacuum cap over the port back here, and then put the hose back on it. Real simple, easy, effective. You know, when we're doing our testing, I'm just going to block it off right here, which is a quick, easy. But if this leaks at all, the more mods you do, you're going to see a lot of decel popping. This needs to get blocked because it acts as a large exhaust leak. So I'll snap that on, show the difference of that while we're shooting the video. Let's see. So let's... General operation of the tuner. Okay, 3 buttons. Minus sign, plus sign. This is the programming... the mode selection switch, we'll say. When when the bike's running, you tap this button, it's going to go green, yellow, red, green, blue, yellow, blue, red, blue, and it goes back to green. It's a loop. Each tap of this is going to move between the mode. Anytime in any mode, if you hit plus or minus, is when you're going to change the mode from one number to the next number. A higher number is an increase of fuel on the first 3 modes, and a higher number on the next 3 modes with the blue light on are going to be a different time when the first mode turns on. That's usually stuff that people don't understand. Most things you got to pay attention to are the first 3 modes. The next 3 are going to be cam profile changes, clutching changes. That'll tell when the fuel and everything needs to come on at different times. So when we start it up and run, I'm just going to jump through the modes and show you the different settings that we're on, and then how to move it around. And then once we have that done, then we'll show you how the tuner is actually affecting the bike, so you can see adding fuel is actually making it richer. Alright. So, turn it on. It's going to scroll around. This is an initialization state. It's not actually doing anything while it's blinking. Right now, solid green light means it's adding fuel. Start tapping this. We got a setting of 4, 1.5, a half, 1.5, 2.5, 3. We want to add fuel in the low speed, turn it up. If you want to take fuel away, turn it down. If at any time you go where it's blinking that fast, it's not doing anything. It's just sitting there running on stock Yamaha pulse width. We know it needs fuel. We're going to start off at 4. This is the 16 to 18 Grizzly map. I'll probably write a specific one for this 19 by the time we get done. Any of these settings, you're altering the map that I have loaded, which is fine. They're all tunable. You want to be able to tune it. It helps you out. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to do a low speed 8 quarter throttle run. Let me put it in gear and then we'll do a run. Okay, we want to focus on the air to fuel ratio. You got that? You can see it? That's about an 8. That's where it's going to need a leaner to the 8 throttle. You got it. We're at a setting of 4. See how the number up there dropped? We're at 13.5 now. We turn back to 4. We're at 14.1. We shut it off where we're not adding any fuel. 16, 17 to 1. We gotta turn these fans on and get a little warm. Okay, hopefully you guys could hear me talking in there. It's kind of loud, but that shows you how the controller is working. Go ahead. We got our settings pretty close on the controller right now for where we want to be at this stage in the testing. I'm just going to do a few passes with the tuner installed and then show you the dyno results of where we're at right now. You can see, horsepower gains as we're going. We're going to do 3 passes: quarter throttle, half throttle, and a full throttle. Off-road, AIS is open at this stage. We'll do 3 more passes after we do that with the AIS block and compare the results. Okay, so we got those 6 passes. We'll talk about, see what we just found. So we had roughly a quarter, half, and full throttle with the AIS open and the AIS blocked. We didn't really see that much of a difference, mainly because the AIS, it really doesn't respond to anything above 4,000 RPM or in that ballpark. And most of the testing we were at is all above 4,000 RPM during our runs, or like just as soon as we start the run, we're over 4,000. So we'll do a little more AIS testing to see what that actually does. So basically, we're looking at the same data for each set of that. You know, we got full throttle passes here. One was AIS blocked, one wasn't. So the gold run is AIS blocked. The green run is AIS open. You know, they both are with a CVT almost identical. You know, that one made 3/4 of a horsepower more there, but if you did it again, it might be the other way. Half throttle is really hard to judge where you're at both, so we got a red versus a brown. You know, one might be 50%, one's 55%. You know, it's really hard to gauge that on your thumb pushing it. And then our quarter throttle, I must have been a little off there, more than 5%, probably like 10%. But our air to fuel ratio with our tuner on there was pretty solid. That one right there went a little bit rich. That was at about a half throttle or just over with the AIS open. So that might be something I'm looking at when I'm fine tuning the mat, that, you know, we need to have it not add quite as much fuel once the pulse width comes up and it's maintaining itself. Okay, pretty good results. Let's do, I guess, while we're talking, let's figure out the AIS for itself. We'll do some really low speed, low RPM stuff, and we'll see if we can see the difference right now of it. Come over here, Drew. Okay. Let's roll it. 14-1. 13-9, 14-1. 700 RPM. We're at 13-2. There's a difference there. Straight up to 45. It's really not doing anything there. And block, slow forward. Not a big difference. I think that's probably going to be a lot harder for you guys to follow in the video, but even at 5,000 RPM, it seemed to be more throttle position related. Anything quarter throttle and below, the block AIS was good for about a half a point difference on your air to fuel ratio, and that's with an addition of fuel. When you don't have the fuel coming in, it's probably even worse than that. Like it went from lean to really lean. So you know, if for some reason you're not going to get a tuner, at least block your AIS. It does make a difference. I got to do a little more testing on that so we find the maps. I think some of the behind-the-scene mapping that I do will fix where it's not running so rich. Right now, it looks like if we're holding quarter throttle a little too long, it's actually having too much fuel, so I got to make the ramp rates a little different. That's probably one of the few small changes behind the scenes that we're going to have to make. All right, we're going to test the airbox next to see what happens, so we can shut it off. Okay, day 2, 19 Grizzly 700 testing. Did a bunch of work behind the scenes. I'll show you what we got built on here so far. Intake, K&N or Uni, option available. Airbox lid. Let's see, horsepower level. We are at, we're sitting 37 right now, stock exhaust, which is pretty solid. I guess, yeah, just hit the starter. We had to do basically a whole new map. I did a little more testing behind the scenes, actually a lot. We spent, the better part of the day actually writing a specific map for this 19. What we ran into is idle fueling was actually much more correct than we thought. I put another stock exhaust that we had drilled out and got some correct readings way up in the header, and then we found out it was actually quite rich at idle. It wasn't rich at all off idle, so we had to make something very specific that was adding fuel as soon as you touch the throttle, but it wouldn't add fuel at idle, which was a good bit different than all the other Grizzlies. The 16 needed fuel everywhere all the time. It was just lean. And then when we started blocking AIS, we had to, it actually amplified the problem. So we got all that solved with some new mapping behind the scenes. I'll show that to you. There'll be some settings that you guys will have to set per bike specific, but it's still pretty easy. So let's see. Let's put this back together here. This new model really likes the airbox lid, which I know a lot of you guys don't want to run an airbox lid, but the intake didn't make a big horsepower difference like it did on the other ones, and the airbox lid didn't make a big difference on the 16 to 18, but these new ones, it's a solid couple of horsepower. Okay, so new map settings. We're gonna have to set idle fueling. Odds are that it's always going to be the same as how we ship them out, but it will be somewhat specific to the bikes. So I'll kind of explain it here. Alright, so on our controller, while it's running, if this light is blinking, it is not adding any fuel. It is waiting to see enough signal to the injector before it starts adding fuel. The trick is you want it to blink at idle, and as soon as you touch the gas, it stops blinking. And you know, this will be handy. You'll want to do your tuning and setting at probably 185 degrees plus. It will change some because the injector duty cycle changes as the temperature warms up. So if you have it set, you know, at 150, 160, it might be slightly different at 185. But here. So that's what you want to see. Like as soon as the bike starts revving, then it should go back to at idle. There we go. It's not adding any fuel. To adjust that is this mode. It's the fourth mode, green-blue. If we lower it from where we had it at 5, just say to even 3.5. It's a really tight adjustment, and I spent a lot of time really fine-tuning it so there was a real fine line because it's that important. It should stay on all the time. So now it's adding fuel at idle. It's solid there. We're going to turn it up to 5. You can probably hear the motor kind of change a little bit. Alright, we're not adding fuel there. So it's so precise of a setting that even if you're a half point off, it may be the difference of it adding fuel versus not adding fuel. Okay, that one we're okay. But then when we get in it, alright, we're adding fuel. And if it gets off, it won't not add fuel. It stays on. So that's where we want to go to that next bump up. Okay, that's the ticket on this bike. Every bike will have a slightly different setting. You know, it'll either be 5 or maybe 5.5 or 6 or 4.5, depending on if your TPS sensor is calibrated at, you know, 0.68 volts versus 0.7, or if your intake air pressure sensor is at, you know, thinks it's this pressure versus this pressure. All those little changes are going to be kind of bike specific. We'll end up sending them out with it set at 5, and it should cover most stuff. But if you don't want to add fuel at idle, at least at my testing at this point. You know, it could change some at, you know, with an exhaust on there, you may want to add fuel at idle. But on a stock pipe, it did not like fuel at idle. Okay, we are back here to the 2019 Grizzly 700 testing. We had to take about a week intermission, waiting on exhaust to show up that the post office lost for about a week. We did some early testing already on the duals. This is a new set of duals here that we're going to test. A full single. I have the slip-on there already that we went through and got all our new baseline runs now, so we can actually do some good graphing of the gains, knock it all out in the same day. Where we're sitting right now, this red line up above is our tuner, the EHS tuner, the intake, and the airbox lid with a slip-on exhaust. The next level down, there is a couple there. There's one without an airbox lid and the slip-on, and the other one is the stock exhaust with our airbox lid. And then we had some stock exhaust testing there. I'll have all the reports, you know, put up on Dynographs, but basically what we found is the slip-on does really well on this bike, and the airbox lid does really well. The intake system that we make is going to seal up a lot better, but a bunch of the gains that we got from the old one were how we shortened the intake tube, and these new 19s already have the shorter intake tube, so I guess Yamaha kind of copied us there and just made it better. So that was a lot of the horsepower gains that we saw. But the slip-on did really well. That one much better than the 16. Let me do a sound test for you guys. I guess a couple of the other things that were different on this testing versus the old stuff is the slip-on in the stock lid actually takes less fuel than the stock pipe. Any of the other Grizzlies, we never saw, you know, any of those results. The slip-on with our airbox lid took surprisingly a lot more fuel. There's a big difference in the settings there. So we'll have a whole bunch of different settings for the tuners with the map that we wrote for these 19s. We're going to swap out the full single now. I'll do a video of that quick so you know you can kind of hear the difference a little bit between the two pipes. They should sound very similar though. So we'll be back shortly. Full single we put on there. Did a quick test. This won't be a long segment of video, but red line was our slip-on. The blue line's the new full single, tuned for what I could get out of it. So that's probably not going to be one of our options we're going to release. It just didn't like it on this model. You know, the duals that we had tested too are also not quite as good. So I guess there's more work to be done on better exhaust options at this moment. But right now the slip-on's doing what we want. So that's probably what we're going to push forward with. And then we'll figure out some new bends and pipe diameters on this new setup to make it work the best that we can. Later. Alright, we're back here with the finishing up of the 2019 Grizzly testing. We have the dual system on there now. This is a little different than the dual system we did on our first testing. This was a newer version of it. One of the other ones was one I was keeping on my personal bike. It didn't do quite as well as this one did. Alright, so our slip-on still is, I mean, for the money, is still kicking butt. Blue line, let's pick it out right here. That's that blue line running through just above my finger. That's the slip-on and our airbox lid. These red and the green lines are the duals with and without quiet cores. It was basically the same thing. Let's see, let's get rid of this. So there is the comparison of duals versus slip-on. You know, it's 2.5 horsepower there. We got 1.5 horsepower there. So really bang for your buck. The slip-on at this moment is the way to go. But the duals are, you know, going to hold up really well to the heat, and they sound pretty awesome. There, go rev that up, Drew. This is with the quiet cores. Okay, we're gonna button it up and we'll rip it around the yard and show you what it looks like.